Hello and welcome back to Lorcana Villain. My name is Baker and today is our next one-on-one interview on the channel. I teased this just the other day. Today I am sitting down, or actually already have sat down at this point of recording the intro, with Jan Moyen, who I'm sure many of you will recognise from the Podcana YouTube channel, podcast available on multiple platforms. It's one of the most informative pieces of Lorcana content out there, in my opinion, hosted by Brendan, Kawa and Moyen. And yeah, I've met Moyen a couple of times now in both Lille and Bologna. Got to know him fairly well, and he performed extraordinarily well at DLC Bologna, coming top 16, making top cut, going all the way to top 16, qualifying for the European Championship. So I asked Moyen if he'd be willing to sit down with me and talk about primarily set 4 format. Now, I know there are a lot of people who will have checked out of set 4. I think if you're going to Toronto, then you're super interested in this conversation. But Moyen, I think, is really one of the best players in the world. And like, just listen, the way he talks about the game, watching the Podcana Podcast, all the boys are great. But yeah, Moyen, just the way he talks about the game is fascinating. He's very talented. And I think even if you are checked out of set 4 meta, I would really advise giving this one a listen. It's another long one. It ended up being about an hour and a quarter, but we spent an awful lot of time looking at the blue steel list that he ran in Bologna. We talk like really in depth into its various matchups, and then we do talk a little bit about how it might adapt going into the next meta. We talk a little bit about a few set 5 cards that Moyen is excited for. But yeah, I just overall found it a really fascinating conversation, and I hope you do too. So yeah, let's jump straight into it. A quick shout out to the channel sponsors, Cardmarket. If you're looking for Lorcana singles at competitive rates, including the new stuff from Shimmering Skies, then check out Cardmarket. But let's jump straight in and have a chat with Moyen. And here, as promised, I am joined by Jan Moyen. It is an absolute pleasure to have you. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak to me. I'm sure so much of my audience, so many of my audience will already know who you are, but of course there may be some people that haven't made their way over to Podcana yet, and hopefully by the end of this they do. So could you please just tell us a little bit about yourself, your history in trading card games, and feel free to name the games. We're not on stream, it's okay. So feel free to talk about what your history is and what led you into Lorcana and when. So by all means, just tell us a bit about yourself.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for having me. I basically got my start in Hearthstone, and I played that for a very long time competitively, from like 2018, and then a few years very much, and then it was like less and less over the years, but for like 4 or 5 years I played Hearthstone competitively. And then I was kind of burnt out by it, and they kept decreasing price support, so I had to quit. And then I tried some Snap, which there wasn't much competing in that game, but it was a very good game for content. But also at some point I was missing the urge to compete, and that's when some friends had again introduced me to actual TCGs, where I always stayed away from them because my mindset was always, if there's no actual price support, if there's no prize money, then I'm not playing it. But then I realized that the cards are selling for a good amount of money, and I actually started playing One Piece first, and through One Piece then I also started playing Lorcana, which basically my co-hosts in Podcana, Brendan and Kawa, have led me to start playing the game. And so I've only really been playing TCGs for a year, and I've been very happy with how I'm doing so far in those 2 TCGs.
How was that transition? Because obviously Hearthstone, I have no experience with it, but I've obviously met, in the Lorcana community, I've met a few people where that was sort of like their beginnings as well. So I know that that's an online only game, and obviously you said you dabbled in Snap, which again, something I think I downloaded right at the very beginning when it was like everyone talking about it. Played a couple of times, wasn't really my sort of thing, but how was that transition to physical card games? Was it something that you had to adapt to, or was it not a big deal really?
So just the theory and everything, I was so accustomed to this type of game. I think I got good at it very quickly. The only problem was, when I started, I couldn't shuffle my cards.
Okay.
So I had to learn that, but that's okay.
Yeah.
But the only thing I still can't do is when you shuffle the cards in your hand while you're playing. I think I personally think it's kind of annoying, but if my opponents want to do it to annoy me, it's fine. I can deal with that. But I personally can't really do it myself. I think it's kind of tricky to do it in such a fluid way that I can custom TCG players to do it.
Yeah, I get what you mean. That's a really interesting thing to stick on for a moment, because I've had this conversation with Spessy as well, obviously, because his history is not physical card games. So I remember the first time we actually played, which was in set 4, so we'd been playing for a couple of sets at this point, and he was struggling so much with the shuffle, and it absolutely makes sense though if you're not used to it.
When I say I couldn't shuffle, I was never as bad as Spessy was.
Just to clarify, just to make that absolutely clear. To be fair, go on.
The hand shuffling thing is also so. I mean, yes, the motion is not easy for me to do, but on top of that, in Hearthstone, it was impossible to shuffle the cards in your hand, so you could track when they drew which card.
Oh,
if
really?
They played that or not? Yes.
There was no like internal shuffle of the cards to prevent things like that.
So if they play a card, you know when did they draw it if you kept track of it. So that entire portion, at least now, I no longer have to care about, because my opponent can shuffle their cards anyways.
Interesting. Was that intentional? Like, was that meant to be a part of the game, that it was something that you could track?
Yeah, I guess so. There's also lots of random or card generation in the game, and then also if you know, okay, a card is generated from some pool, and you can now track, okay, this could be any of these cards. I think that's kind of intentional. Then in tournaments, it was very difficult to do this, and unless it was online tournaments where there was trackers allowed, because you couldn't really see if people were using it or not, so they just allowed them anyways. And then those trackers were doing all the work for you, and they gave small numbers onto every card to indicate at which turn were they drawn.
Did that ever affect more than just knowledge and memory, from a gameplay perspective? So for an example, like my history game is Yu-Gi-Oh! And as you talk about this, one of the first things that comes to mind, and there's plenty of cards that I could use an example, but the one that came to mind to me was Yu-Gi-Oh! Fans will remember a very old card called Ordeal of a Traveller, which basically meant if your opponent attacked you, you played this trap card, and it was continuous, like it was every time your opponent attacked. You chose a card in your opponent's hand, and if you were able to guess if it was either a monster, a spell, or a trap card, and you were correct, that attack was cancelled, and the monster was returned to their hand. And this was just a continuous thing. So in Yu-Gi-Oh! You can shuffle your hand. But I remember when I was like 11 years old, first learning the game with my friend next door, we had this thing going where we didn't know if you were allowed to shuffle a hand, so they would just every turn know the exact card in my hand, so they could keep bouncing my monster. And obviously we ended up learning that yes, you can shuffle your hand, but I bring it up because it just seems like something like that could become broken in RuneScape if you have that access to knowing when your opponent drew.
Oh, you mean in Hearthstone?
Hearthstone, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, no, stuff like that never existed. It was just memorizing it helped you make better decisions.
Yeah, no, that's fair. And just to finish off on this point, going back to the hand shuffling thing, this is something that I'm super guilty of and have been I played Yu-Gi-Oh! Competitively for like 6 years, near the early stages of the game. And I put some of it down to ADHD, just because it helps me I struggle to sit and concentrate on a game, which obviously can be very detrimental to your skill level. And I've just found that I learned this as something in Yu-Gi-Oh! That helped me focus. I don't know why it helps. I couldn't possibly tell you the science of it, but to be honest, it's probably more of a mental thing at this point. I think it helps, and it probably actually doesn't. But nonetheless, it's something that I'm super guilty of. I've always been a quick hand shuffler. But so you've got a super good background in TCGs, which obviously from early on that's going to help you from a skill perspective of learning Lorcana. And you said that it was Brendan and Kawa that got you into that game. So It would be interesting to know how you met Brendan and Kawa, how they got you into Lorcana, and how Podcana came to be.
So I met them both through Marvel Snap at a tournament that Kawa actually organized. We met in Manchester and kept in contact since. And then at the start, I wasn't part of Podcana. It was more rather I quickly got good at the game, and then I appeared on a few of their episodes as a guest. And then they kept wanting me as a guest, and then at some point it just made sense to join if I'm guesting like every
Yeah.
second episode. So yeah, I'm very happy with how everything went with Podcana.
Yeah, no, it's genuinely one of my favorite podcasts. I'm not just buttering you up because you're there, like because you're here. It was one of the first like real competitive pieces of content that I would start to consume. Like very early on, like I followed some of the early ones, like shout out to the Illumateers, like because I'm interested in the art and that's what they specialize in, so I went there for that very much. There was John T at the Inkwell who did a lot of card reviews and stuff, and I like John T. I think he's got a nice way of presenting things. And then it was Steadfast was my first sort of like you're the competitive guy I go to, but you were very much the next sort of podcast that I was consuming for that. So again, if you're watching this interview and you're not subscribed to Podcana, I very much recommend them. So what is it that you like about Lorcana, and is any of it any of affection for the Disney franchise, or is it purely a TCG mechanics perspective?
Well, it is. I mean, it's always the TCG that's first for me. That doesn't mean that I don't like Disney. My favorite character from Disney is probably Donald Duck. Give me 1 second.
I actually know what you're about to show, but my audience might not. So I'm super excited for you to reveal this on my channel.
I recently showed it on the podcast.
I know. I saw it.
But yeah, this is my Donald Duck figurine.
I absolutely adore it.
It actually, when I was a kid, it fell off my desk once, and I had to glue it together again. But you can barely notice.
No, it looks amazing. That is commitment. I love that, and I also think you said on that Podcana that the new Donald Duck card, the ruby one from Shimmering Skies, is like it's like. But I'm paraphrasing you, but the gist I got of it is this is the first card I've ever been interested in building a deck around just because I like the card. Like
no, okay, that's not what I said. I think I said that I want. No, because I'm not really into theme decks, but it's like a card I would collect just to collect it, even if I don't care about playing it. Rather that. But at the end of the day, I think the game's really fun. As everyone probably says, I think the biggest depth comes from inking every turn, and there's a lot of depth that comes from that. And I personally want to at least compete in a world championship. I've done very well in all the games I've played. I think in Hearthstone I was 2 games away from Worlds once. In One Piece I was 3 or 4 games away from Worlds. And now with European Championship, we don't know the format quite yet, but that's really the big dream there.
Of course, and like you should be, and I can tell that you are proud of yourself, and rightly so. Yes. That's a great accomplishment, and I'm glad that you do feel that way about it. And yeah, I mean, again, I've said it before. I like on the channel. There's a few names, few players that I certainly shout out like quite regularly. Great players in the game, but I've always stated you as one of the best players in the world. The way just listening to you talk about the game is fascinating, and quite often it's from a level that is above my immediate comprehension, and quite a lot of time I go away and roll it over in my head, and it takes me a little further to get there, but it's like I just enjoy the way you think about the game, and you've played at the highest level competitively so far. You're also quite consistently either at the top or near the top of the Pixelborn leaderboard back when in its prior state, which again is a huge accomplishment considering the amount of people that were playing that and the amount of people that were grinding that. So that's awesome. You played in Disney Lorcana Challenge, Lille and Bochum. We won't settle on them too long, but what did you play for those 2 events?
I played Green Purple in Lille, and then I played Red Blue in Bochum. I basically always play all the decks that I deem to have enough potential to maybe be the best bring for any tournament, depending on how the meta can change. And I think the one downside that comes with being a content creator is like people will know what deck you're playing. If I was to just play the same deck all the time, I assume most people expected me to be on Red Blue for Bologna, and I haven't contemplated it, but one of the small reasons that maybe pushed me away from it was, I don't want to play what everyone's expecting when the first game mulligans blind.
Yeah, it is a huge advantage, and it's something, again, I've been lucky enough to cast, so I haven't had to encounter this all that much from actually obviously I've played set championships where they read me like a book, but like everyone knows red purple are my colours and are likely to always be my colours. But so I can absolutely understand like if I was going into, like, if I got the chance to go to America to play one event, then I would have to put that serious consideration into, like, if you go with red purple, everybody is just going to know, and that is just a huge disadvantage from the offset. So I respect the decision. Yeah, green purple in Lille, that was set 3 format, so like it was a very reasonable choice at the time, I think. And set 4. Sorry, repeat what you played in Bochum.
Red blue.
Red blue. Obviously,
so
kind
honestly,
of your pet deck.
Yeah, I played. I think overall my meta or my deck picks and play was good at all 3 tournaments, but in hindsight, green purple didn't work at all in Lille. Somehow there was like a French pocket meta that was full of amethyst steel, which wasn't really a thing outside of France, and I wasn't aware of that, and playing green purple kind of played right into that. So that's really the one tournament where probably it wasn't a great bring. The deck that I picked, I think, at the other ones, in total, because like, yes, I'm proud of the achievement now, but I'm almost as proud of the other 2 tournaments. I think I prepared just about the same, played the same level. But you have to like keep working hard and doing well and getting better, and then maybe sometimes you will also get the wins needed to make top cut and make it further, because that's a super difficult thing to do no matter how well you play.
I do want to highlight that actually, because I think that's a super important message for, like, you know, less experienced players, that like we have Moyen here who made top 16 for one event, but is just as proud of 2 events where didn't get that same level of success. And it just goes to show that, hey, sometimes there's nothing you can do about it. Like you say, you know, sometimes you find yourself in strange pocket metas. Sometimes your pairings are just incredibly cruel to you, and there's always RNG. So if you think you played to the best of your abilities, that's every reason to still be proud of yourself and keep working hard and just attain to do better and better, which is exactly what you did when we went to Bologna and we finally made that top 16, not only making the day 2 cut, but qualifying for European Championships, which is, you said not long ago, like playing at Worlds is the dream, and playing at Euros is one big step towards that dream. So I know I've said this to you before, but again, massive congratulations, my friend. You really, really do deserve it. And I'd like to talk a little bit about that, because obviously a lot of people, they've left set 4 mindset. Set 5 is the shiny new toy, but there's of course a good just under 2,000 people that will be playing Toronto who will be still very interested in any discussion concerning this meta. And I also think even people that aren't playing Toronto, like the best players in the game, they're still going to have an interest in watching this event and seeing what happens. Because if you're a Lorcana fan, you might not be playing that meta anymore, but I still think there's going to be a lot of eyes on it and a lot of people that will be interested in what you have to say. So let's talk about Saphire Steel. First of all, what led to the decision to run this deck? You've already said part of it was because you wanted to be less readable on what colours you were playing, but I'm sure you wouldn't. I'm sure there are other boxes that still needed to be ticked to decide to pick this specifically. There are plenty of things you could have picked that weren't red blue. So what led to this deck decision first, and then we'll talk a bit about your Swiss and your Top Cut run.
Okay, so there's a lot of work that goes into picking a deck for a tournament of this magnitude. So something I try to do for these is work out all the matchups between the top decks of the meta. And though that is much harder to do in this game than it was, for example, in Hearthstone, where we had thousands of games each day, which were all tracked automatically by stats data websites. But right now we don't have any of that. So basically, but that doesn't mean that you cannot do this work. It's just you have to be very careful of your own biases, and but still you have to rely on your opinion and the people that you trust in their opinions, if maybe there's some decks you haven't played so much, and then really evaluate how likely do I think am I to win if I play deck A against deck B against my average opponent in a Lorcana challenge. And by my average opponent, that is actually not just the average player at the challenge, because I would think highly enough of myself where I think I'm expected to do well, so I would face like a little bit better quality of player than just the average. But still, I think against the for example, in all mirrors, I think I'm at least slightly favored. Sapphire Steel mirrors is the one where it's definitely the least. Maybe it's not even favored at all, but the red purple matchup against my average opponent, I think, is one of my best matchups. I think that's really one where there's a lot of skill gap by just playing better than your opponent. So then working out all of those matchups is already a big chunk of the work, but any game you play basically goes into that, because you kind of like develop a feel for what chances you think you could have as deck A against deck B. And then when you work all that out, then next you have to also estimate the expected fields of your potential opponents. Again, you're in a 2K player event, my average opponent, I think generally, if I remember correctly, there was like 20-ish, 25-ish% in a lot of challenge events of meta colors, which were not like the top 4, top 5 decks.
That sounds about right.
But I have to factor those in. I could face them, but I don't think I faced them at like in a 25-ish% rate, because I think generally these colors tend to perform a little worse, and I expect myself to perform a little better. So I factor those in at like 10% instead of 20-ish. And then
because you only have to dodge them really the first couple of rounds, and then past that you shouldn't be running into them anymore on average.
Yeah, it gets a lot less likely. And then in this tournament, I think as the last one, I got pretty close with my estimations for expected field, and then based on that you can calculate average rated win rates for any of the decks that you could bring, and that already gives you a slight indication, or a good indication, of maybe what decks to really consider bringing to the tournament. In my case, that was Ruby Sapphire, Sapphire Steel, or Ember Steel. So the other ones were already lacking behind in the evaluations that I gave them. So they were almost out of the question. And then now you think a lot of the work's done already, but now you actually have to start thinking, is there any way to improve, like to significantly improve any of these decks for this expected matchup spread, where maybe also some of the matchup percentages or evaluations that you gave could change and lead to any of these decks actually being a little bit better than what you worked out. For me, a lot of work went into Red Blue and Sapphire Steel, because Ember Steel was never really close to being a playstyle I enjoy. If I thought it would have been significantly better, of course I would have put in the work too, but I had an internal bias. I don't really like playing Ember Steel. Yep. So Sapphire Steel and Ruby Sapphire were really the two decks I was contemplating to play from there. And
I do think that makes just the top on that for 1 second. I do think that makes a difference. Like, it's not a matter that these, like, the top level of players can't learn to play a deck they don't like as good as it can be, but I still think, just from a mental perspective, like, if you're playing a deck you just don't enjoy, you're going to be having a miserable time even if you win. Maybe not. There's definitely room for bias. That if you win the event, that's obviously going to significantly increase your enjoyment. But if you have a subpar run, especially if you're chasing from behind, you know, like, I do think that can long term have an effect on even the best players and cause them to, like, maybe not play their best.
Yeah, I'd like to think of myself as a robot that doesn't care, but I probably also care a little bit, even.
And it might only be 1% of the time. It might only be 1%, one turn in one game in all of those, but you never know what difference that's going to make.
You cannot afford to get tilted at all.
Yeah.
That's the worst thing that can happen. So, so then I went on to work out Ruby Sapphire, Sapphire Steel. And the most important matchup, because they're both they were both good against Emerald Steel anyways. For both of these decks was really okay. Can I improve the Ruby Amethyst matchup?
Mm-hmm.
And yes, you can, but okay, now how can I improve it, and at what cost does it come to my other matchups?
Mm-hmm.
For Ruby Sapphire, I did a lot of math on how often you don't even get to play the game against Red Purple when you are on the draw, which included basically, depending on how many 2-cost characters I was playing in my deck, how often do they play Flynn when I don't have a 2-drop?
Mm-hmm.
How often do they play Flynn on 2, Sisu on 3 when I didn't draw my 2-drop? How often do they play Flynn on 2 and I don't have a 2-drop or have 1 jump into Tada? Because if they go Flynn without the Sisu, if you go 1 jump into Tada, you're completely fine. But in the other scenarios, there's already big problems and the game is very close to ending quickly. And at 3 2-drops, 4 2-drops, the chance of you not really getting to play the game was still pretty high. For example, with the mulligan assumptions that I was making, I also made a huge Twitter thread about it if you want to read it up. I had like 17.7% not to find a 2-drop against Flynn Sisu. And if you don't have a 2-drop against Flynn Sisu, you basically lose the game. At the same time, the deck's main game plan doesn't really work by playing lots of 2-drops. You want to ramp, go low on hand size, and then in a lot of matchups just draw better cards in your opponent. If you suddenly play 5, 6 2-drops, first of all, you need to make space of that. Second of all, suddenly your average value of your top decks goes down significantly. So I think you couldn't improve it by that much, and improving it significantly hurt your other matchups. And then on top of that, I think it was still very, very close to Sapphire Steel on like estimated value, but or expected value. But in the end, I felt like most people would still expect me to be on red blue. Although my last 2 set champs, I on purpose didn't play red blue. So I was like, okay, I just get some Ursulas with other decks, post that, and maybe people don't expect me to be on red blue. But I still felt like most people would still expect me to be on red blue anyways.
Like that was a feint. Like that was the feint. Trying to get people to think you play. What did you play at the set champs instead? Sapphire Steel.
Yeah, no, so in my first 3 set champs, I played red blue, and then in the last weekend, I played red purple on the Saturday.
Okay.
And then Sapphire Steel on the Sunday. So actually, if someone would have looked up my Twitter, the last deck I posted was Sapphire Steel, which now maybe I was shooting myself in the leg, but that happens.
Do you have any examples, like during Swiss, of running into someone that you think made that call early that you were on red blue, that maybe recognized you? Did you ever feel like that was actually significant in the end?
It is a very, very minor thing, and there's not that many deviations in your mulligan that you make based on the matchup. Like it doesn't actually come up that often. I do think some people expected me to be on red blue, and then I wasn't. But I would have needed to see the hand if it actually made a difference in the mulligan. So then I went on to work more on Sapphire Steel, and if you can improve the red purple matchup. And to my surprise, in a lot of testing, I felt like you can actually steal a lot of games on the draw by not playing a 2-drop on 2 and instead shooting their 2-drop with a damage spell. And the general consensus between Sapphire Steel players has always been, no, you play a 2-drop into the Flynn, then you ramp, play a big guy, it's protected against beaking. But you're still super far behind if you do that. If they go Flynn into Sisu, on the turn you ramp, they still get the Flynn trigger off unless you negate the draw of your 1-cost item, which is also, like, it sounds nice, but I think most of the time it's wrong, and you should just let them have the 3 lore and still take the card draw in that spot. Then if you play Argis, they could still quest with their Flynn, and even risking not to have their Flynn trigger, but if I trade, now the Sisu is uncontested, I again don't have beaking protection, they can again castle me. But if you just get rid of the Flynn, it doesn't get to quest at all, it never gets to to get the +3 lore. Yes, the card you ramped into is vulnerable to Be King Undisputed. And they can play an empty board castle, but all of those things I felt like could be combated. One, by ramping into a 6-drop that has 4 strength, which means that now, as soon as they lose the quest, you get to value trade it with either Tinkerbell or Gaston, but this is really where the big reason why I wanted to play Gaston. I think Gaston provides a lot of consistency anyways. It also lets you play turn 5 Tamatoa on the play when you win turn 2 Smee, turn 3 Quill, which otherwise, if you play Smee, Quill, Tinkerbell, you would be missing 1 card to really reach the Tamatoa, which it's extremely important for the red-purple matchup to drop the Tamatoa before they even have access to the Be Prepared. And the next thing why this really works is because Ed had won the last NA challenge without any Be Kings or Tremaines.
Yeah,
which
I was going to ask you about that specifically, if you thought that made much of a difference.
Well, it made a difference in me thinking that the matchup is like a little bit better than it would otherwise be. In the end, I played against 5 or 6 red purple, and all of them had Be King or Tremaine. One of them only had 1 Tremaine, I think, which is, I mean, that's basically like no Be King, no Tremaine. I was safe on their turn 5, and then later maybe sometimes they have 1 Tremaine. But yeah, no one was on the complete ad list of my opponents. I know some people that copied his list did make top cut. It's just I didn't face them.
Yeah. So you were up against this Ruby Amethyst build, which is, and I've said this for a long while. Like I've always felt RA lists with a good count of Be Kings and Tremaine. Like I always feel much better going into Sapphire Steel. And again, there's definitely discrepancy there for like skill level and like the Sapphire Steel knowing how to pilot against that. But that's why I bring it up, because you played into the versions of Ruby Amethyst, which myself and I've heard other people say it should feel a little better into Sapphire Steel. So what, like, if there's any Sapphire Steel players out there that they like Sapphire Steel, but that is what they're like, they find they're losing to the Be Kings and the Tremaines, is there any specific advice there or anything like you can talk about that's interesting concerning that matchup?
Well, I think you just have to play into it. I think the easiest way to lose is to play around it and then not even pressure stuff at all. So it's really forcing the turn 5 Tamatoa if you can afford to keep something on the board against the Be King. Just like Quill is still miles better than Mickey in the matchup, in my opinion. I've heard some people say they prefer Mickey in the matchup. I think that's absolutely wild and you're far too slow. The matchup really is about finding the window of opportunity to become the aggressor yourself, and not, if you just keep answering their threats, you are not going to win the game most of the time, because red purple doesn't run out of stuff to do very easily. Yeah, and then on top of that, by me just playing deal damage on the Flynn, that means if I play Quill next turn, they have an empty board where they have a 3-drop on the boards already, maybe a 1-drop, and they are so encouraged to play Castle, which will net them some lore. But I was playing 3 Rise of the Titans, and this was really how I could also recover tempo. And generally on my 6-ink turn post Quill, you don't play Rise because it's very awkward in your turn unless you can go like Mickey Rise and the 1 card you keep in hand is Flower Charm. But usually you just play your 6-drop, and then next turn you go Flower Charm, draw 2 cards, ink 2 cards, play Rise, or ink 1 card, play Rise. So you really don't overreact to their threats. You have to set up a way to efficiently deal with them so that you can also really get a tempo swing from it. If they play Castle, you play Rise. If it still costs you your entire turn, you didn't really gain anything from that. They actually gain something because they already had characters on the board that get to quest again.
So it is thinking, sometimes it's just thinking that 1 turn further ahead, thinking it's like how much I'm equalizing the game state, or how I'm getting further ahead from answering this straight away, compared to if I do it over a couple of turns, I come out better in the long run, right? Yeah. So
basically against the okay, I'm going on this for a long time, but I think it's a very good example. On the draw against Flynn Sisu, if you just go I think the perfect way to respond to it, even if let's say they go Flynn, Sisu, Castle, is you go Baboom the Flynn, for example. I guess perfect would be I was playing one Fight Against if I could go 2-drop into Quill Fight Against, but that doesn't happen that often. So let's say you just Baboom the Flynn, they play Sisu, you play Quill, they play Castle, and Quest with the Sisu. Now you play turn 4 on the 6 ink, either Gaston or Tinkerbell. It doesn't really matter that much which one it is. And now, okay, they gain the Castle lore, but now they're in such an awkward position because next turn, if they want to quest with the Sisu, you get to trade it with the Gaston, and then you play something like, optimally, I guess, Flower Charm, Rise of Titans. And yes, the Sisu quested twice. Yes, the Castle gained 2 lore, but now you're really starting to be ahead yourself, and that's where you can start to win the game. On top of that, if they were not to quest because you have a good trade, now maybe you sing Holy World and you have 8 ink, you play Tamatoa, let the Castle get another 2 lore, and then you deal with it. And it's really about making them, sometimes pressuring them is the best defense, because suddenly they're not allowed to just keep playing gold bounce, drawing cards, because they had to spend 4 ink on a Bee King or 6 ink on a Tremaine. So yeah, that matchup, I've played it a million times, and I actually felt like I could be favored into the matchup, especially if they are low on Bee Kings. And on top of that, it doesn't cost me much in other matchups at all to be favored against it, because Baboom's Fighter Cannons, I was playing 5/2 damage spells in the end. They were not, like, initially people thought they wouldn't be great against Red Purple and they would just be good against Emerald Steel. But now we had Emerald Steel, which was almost a quarter of the matchup spread.
Mm-hmm.
On top of that, Ember Steel was going up in popularity every single challenge event, so that was also a good chunk of the metagame.
Mm-hmm.
So now now, yes, we are playing more 2 damage spells, but it's not just because of Red Purple. It's also very, very good against Emerald Steel and Ember Steel. I for a long time I tested not playing Argis at all, because I was like, if I don't need it on the draw against Flynn, do I really need it at all? But it still ended up being very, very important, because I was also trying to stay low on not super impactful Uninkables. So I think Gaston was a great card. I think the Falcons was great. I don't think I wanted to use an Uninkable slot for Zeus. So I was playing 0 Zeus, and if you play 0 Zeus, sometimes even mid to later stages of the game, the Sisu can be really annoying to deal with. So then mid-game, the Argis can be great as beacon protection that can also take out the Sisu as soon as it quests once.
Nice. Yeah.
But on top of that, on the play, it just gives you a little more consistency instead of just having to find the Smee. Plus, on the draw, what was it, like 40-ish? I don't have the numbers up by now, but your opponent doesn't have Flynn every time. If they don't play Flynn, you would much prefer to play a 2-drop on the draw than to play Baboom on followers or Boom. So even then it gives you some consistency. So in the end, I went back to 2 Argis, and I did not regret that one, but they performed very well.
So you're so well insulated, like going second against the deck that's most likely to be one of the top.
Yes, I just tried. Yeah, I tried to give myself the highest, because on the play the matchup's really, really good. Gaston makes it even better, because if you lose, it's generally like if you go Quill into anything on the Quill against Red Purple, the way you lose is running out of stuff to do. And Ariel, I think there was a decent amount of games where I wouldn't win them if that Gaston was Ariel, like a really big amount. There was probably some other times where Ariel would have been much better than the Gaston.
Like the mirror.
Yes, I played far too many mirrors, and it's the biggest downside of playing Sapphire Steel, because there's barely any edge to be gained.
So many Sapphire Steel players that they are the ones that complain most about their mirror match.
Yeah. And the Ember Steel mirror is, I guess, similar, but Sapphire Steel, it's extremely difficult to 2-0 it, and to top the challenge for sure, you need 14 wins out of 18 games. And I faced 3 mirrors. If I actually managed to 2-0 one of them, but imagine I tie my 3 mirrors, which means the 6 other games, I can only drop a single game out of 12 to make top cut. So, yeah, it's difficult to bring this deck if it's played a lot, not because it's bad, but because it's very, very difficult to TCG with the mirror. My deck list wasn't particularly strong in the mirror. I think the biggest, but I actually don't think me not playing Bells or Ariels and instead playing Gaston hurts the matchup that much. I think still the biggest determining factor in winning the mirror is how many Tamatoas do you play? How many answers to Tamatoa do you play? Because the way the matchup goes is both players can quickly set up a board the other player barely can interact with, and then the player goes first generally wins the race. So you go like Smee. I still think Quill is better in that matchup than the one law for Mickey. I think it enables you to do much more powerful things later along the lines that are more valuable than the one law each turn from the Mickey.
Yeah.
But okay, so let's say you go Smee, Quill, Cogsworth. Next turn, Cogsworth sings Honeywell, play another Cogsworth Smee. Something like that, you cannot do anything about that. You will just lose the race because they did this first. And they can do this pretty consistently. So, how does the player going second overcome this losing race? Generally, the only real counterplay you have is setting up more like lore, setting up characters in a way where you can get to 20 lore before them, and generally that is Tamatoa. Bell, Ariel could maybe try to do the same, but I think Tamatoa is the best way of doing this, which the player on the play usually never or rarely takes the risk of developing Tamatoa, because if they get Let It Go, suddenly they were winning the race before, now they're losing it. When the player that goes second can take the risk because they were losing the race anyways, but if they don't have to Let It Go, sometimes you can steal a game like that. So I actually think while my deck wasn't great for the moment, I was playing 0 Bell, 0 Ariel, 0 Beast Hard-Headed, I think it still had the basis down of, okay, I have to Let It Go for Tamatoa. Even if, let's say my opponent has 4 Tamatoa to Let It Go, and on top of that they have a few extra dime targets, especially Bell I think is pretty decent in the mirror. Maybe they play Beast Hard-Headed. Even then, I don't think you're that unfavored. You're very, very likely still going to 1-1 that matchup. So while you don't want to face the matchup, it's not a matchup you really want to be tacking towards.
Yeah, super fascinating. Like, I really appreciate the detail in to these various common matchups. Did you face much Emerald Steel at all? Because obviously that's another allure of running Blue Steel, is that should be fairly free. Unless you're going to tell me I'm wrong.
I mean, okay, so I actually think it's not as free as people make it out to be.
Okay, go on.
I think Sapphire Steel players, they're a little overconfident in the matchup. It's of course a very good matchup, but it's not free at all. It's very easy to get a game stolen, especially when you're on the draw. Even when you do stabilize the hand size, which is definitely possible, you can they still have some boards that it takes you a while to get rid of, and then even an Ursula quests for a while, and especially Robin Hood can sometimes quest for a long time before you finally stabilize the board. And also, if the Emerald Steel players if they time their shift Diablos well instead of exactly into the removal of Sapphire Steel, there's some value in that.
The coves have got to help, right? Like if an experienced Emerald Steel player, knowing to put the Diablo down on a turn, you can also go to the cove.
Setting up the Diablo on the cove is a huge game changer if that's a possible play, or just if it's into their removal turn, maybe play the Aladdin instead, play the Diablo into a turn where it would really, really hurt the Sapphire Steel player. I think there's some ways you can maximize your chances in the matchup, and I don't think it's free at all. Also, the Grab Your Swords, it can be very swingy if you get it at the right moment, but they also have some control of it with Ursula. Maybe can set up the Prince John. That's the one detriment. I think Prince John is really, really good in Emerald Steel. It improves red-blue and red-purple matchup significantly. I think red-purple players were coping before, thinking they're fine against Emerald Steel, but when they start including Prince Johns, that they're not fine at all.
No, I know that's not the case. That's what other than Daisy, but we'll get there. But yeah, that is not simple by any means.
Yeah, so I think actually Red Purple wasn't a great deck in set 4. I think Bucky wouldn't have been as much of an issue if people weren't so stubborn on continuing to play Red Purple when Emerald Steel matchup was atrocious, and there was Ember Steel, Sapphire Steel, Ruby Sapphire that all had like favorable matchups against Emerald Steel.
Yeah.
But all the Red Purple players, and like I get it, I like the deck, but all the Red Purple players kind of kept feeding the Buckies. So the Bucky had insane conversion rates, I think, in big parts because Red Purple players didn't accept that that's a losing matchup.
Yeah. Red Purple players coping is why Bucky got to what it got to.
Well, the card wasn't. I mean, Bucky wasn't a fun card.
No, there are other reasons, but I don't think you're. I'm laughing, but I like. It's half a joke, but there is like a lot of truth there at the same time. I think
it shouldn't. I think. Let's say we had tournaments like, let's say 64-player tournaments with only insane players. I don't think Bucky would have performed as well as it did because people would have adjusted and not they would have played less. Like it would have evened out because less people play with purple and Bucky gets worse. Maybe then more people play with purple again.
It would have been interesting to see, like, if the errata had never happened, it would be interesting to see what his representation would have been like at an event like Euros and Worlds, which are like those super exclusive invite only. Fortunately or unfortunately, we'll never know. Most likely, but yeah, super good matchup spread across the board. Yeah, I think just to finish that point, did you actually end up facing many Emerald Steel decks?
I forgot to respond.
No, you're fine.
I faced a single one, so I think while I think my deck, because I'm so happy we got the data, because if I don't have the data, I can't even evaluate was it a good bring or not. But with the data that we got, I was very happy with my bring. With the matchups that I've gotten, I wasn't expected to make top cut. My Swiss matchups were 1 Ember Steel, which is a close matchup, believe it or not. I don't think it's free at all. And then 1 Bucky, 3 Mirrors, and 4 Red Purple. And I tried my best to make the Red Purple matchup good. I think it was slightly favored, but with like 4 slightly favored matchups, 3 matchups that are basically a 1-1, it's I don't think I was very likely to make top cut with the matchups that I faced.
But you still got there, and again, as we said, like the mirror is awful, and the Ruby Amethyst decks, they were kind of kitted out for what we would expect to do slightly better against Blue Steel, as opposed to the non-beaking effects. But that goes to show still like a really incredible Swiss run, not an easy Swiss run, but all worth it to make day 2. Now, I know you faced Red-Blue. Was that your first round of Top Cut?
No, I didn't face Red-Blue.
Oh, okay. I know a couple of the data things they put up on the stream were slightly incorrect. Talk us through your Top Cut run. I know your last match was the mirror.
Yeah. So my first match was against Ember Steel.
Right.
I thought this was my first time making Top Cut. When I didn't make Top Cut, I kind of didn't focus too much on exactly the entire point situations and everything. So when I went 504 with 47 points, I just assumed I probably have a decent seed. But there was a million people on 47 points. Right. I had a bad tiebreaker, which meant I was seed 40.
Okay.
Which meant going into my first Top Cut match, I didn't have the dice. I think the Ember Steel matchup's close, and it kind of depends on their list, but also on mine. My list is pretty good against the matchup because of the 1 Fire Cannons for Baboom. And then it depends on their list. I think Golden Harp improves the matchup a lot. Like flutes are pretty good in the matchup. In the end, I faced a list without Golden Harps, but with flutes, I think pretty standard list with Gaston as an extra Singer 5. And the first game, in the end, it looked like my opponent just Giga bricked, but it only because the game went a certain way, they really bricked. Otherwise, they would have been completely fine. So the way the game went is they go queen on 1. I don't have my fighter cannon, so I'm like, okay, if they have shift queen here, I'm already pretty far behind. Mm-hmm. But instead, on turn 2, they play the small Robin Hood.
Okay.
And So
They probably
I
don't
do a
have the
little
big
bit.
queen.
Yeah, I do a little bit of table talk, and I look him in the eye and I say, "Okay, you don't have shift queen." And then he's like, hmm. And then I go on, and I think you have shift Robin Hood. So what I do is I shoot the Robin Hood, pass over to him, and his turn he doesn't ink, plays another small Robin Hood. I'm like, yes, you do have the Robin Hood. So I do have the quill in hand, but I just go baboom again,
Right.
and then he had to ink the big Robin Hood. At the end of the game, his hand was 3 Zeus, 3 Whole New World. He never got to stick any singer. So yes, he bricked, but if I don't have two damage spells in that game,
you
just
made
go
him
shift
brick.
Robin Hood Whole New World,
Yeah.
and then so that really paid off that game.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next 2 games were absolutely crazy. I think the second game, I'm on the draw, and they have a really good opener where they set up a singer on turn 3. They go turn 1, turn 2, play some stuff. And then turn 3, set up a singer, then go Lorwyn, sing Whole New World. I'm super far behind. And I'm just trying to hang on to the game. But then I hope I'm remembering this correctly. I think then they went Ariel, find a Whole New World. I definitely knew they had a Whole New World in hand from Ariel. And I thought at that point, okay, this is the icing on the cake. I cannot win from here anymore. But of course, I kept trying, and they were actually, I think they were like a little bit greedy on trying to get all the tempo out of their hand before their Whole New World, which in the end led to me being able to remove the only singer that could sing it. And then from then on, he would have had to hardcast it if he wanted to play it. And I was in this weird situation where I have to ink enough so that I'm good if he plays Only World, but I have to not ink too much because then I don't even have enough meaningful plays if he doesn't Only World me. And in the end, I think on a hand where I had 2 dimes, I quilled 1 dime. And then he again, I expected him to Only World, he again didn't do it. And I Tamatoa sticks, I play 1 dime. Oh, no, I think I set up the dime. And later I played Tamatoa. Anyways, he never ended up Whole New Worlding. And on my final turn, with a Tamatoa sticking dime on the board, I can go to exactly 19. If I had 1 more item, I got to 20.
Second dime, yeah.
If I had that second dime, I would also go to 20. Of course, it's very much hindsight bias.
Yeah, of course.
For example, if I keep 2 cards in hand, he's also more likely to pull the trigger on the Whole New World. So it was a weird balance to be had. And in the end, I can only go to 19. Actually, the final turn in which I go to 19, if I make the wrong play, I go to 20. But because I made the correct play, I go to 19. So I have Tamatoa Flavasham on the board, and a dime and a few items. So what I could. So now I have to decide. Okay, in which order do I quest? Questing with Tamatoa is like a safe lore first, because I didn't banish the item of Flavasham yet.
Yeah.
But this one safe lore doesn't do me any favors in almost any situation, because I need to draw quite a few items anyways, to really get enough lore in total. So I go Flavasham first, draw 2 cards, and if these are items, right, maybe I find 2 items in total.
2 1-drops, yeah.
I gain the 1 extra lore, and I actually draw 0 items, then quest with Tamatoa to replenish a 1-cost item, play it, draw 1-cost item, play it, draw 1-cost item, play it, draw 1-cost item, play it. On board now I can dime to 19. I think I draw another Tamatoa and go Tamatoa. No wait, that was another game. Okay, so with the 3 1-cost items off the top, I can go to 19.
Yeah.
And because I didn't draw any items of Flavasham, but they were all on the exact 3rd draw anyways, if I did it the other way around, I would have gone to 20.
Right, yeah, I see. Another one of those hindsight moments, but...
Yeah. And, that was that. So I go to 19, we go to game 3, and I'm still pretty confident. Now I'm pretty confident. Going into the set, I wasn't, but now I'm on the play. I should be fine. And in the end, it was an extremely close game again, where, if I remember correctly, I bricked quite a bit. and then had to win the long game, and I get Holy Worlded a lot, and so the game goes back and forth a lot. In the end, I had set up a board where I can go to 20 if they don't. Okay, I should also mention, there was one turn where I stick a Tamatoa. He had already inked one World's Greatest Criminal Mind with 2 World's Greatest Criminal Mind in the deck.
Okay.
And then he draws cards off Rapunzel, plays Ariel. Ariel finds the Criminal Mind with 3 ink left open, and removes it. And if he doesn't, the game's over. But then the game was completely open again. And then later, we were both kind of getting to a point where we wouldn't be able to answer all of our opposing threats indefinitely. Some we needed to really push. And then I played a final Tamatoa, which, if he doesn't remove enough, would allow me to go to 20. And he couldn't. He set up a board where I could never remove it, so I need to go to 20 next turn. And I set it up in a way where I have 8 cards in the deck. So if he didn't set up a board if he instead removed my board, instead of setting up a board I can't remove, then I could stall one more turn, still have 8 cards in deck. So after my draw, I had 8 cards. And then even if you Holy Words me, I draw the final card and then finish the game.
Yeah.
So it was also going into, like, it was close to overtime. So it was very, very stressful game. But in the end, they passed back over to me. And with the dimes, with dime and the items that I had, I could go exactly to 20. But I actually had a really cool play. I think I could have gone to 24.
The style points. Go on, tell us.
I didn't do it because, well, I could go to 20 on board. But I went through my trash. I had 4 one-cost items in my, like, on the board or in trash. Discard pile, or what is it called?
Discard.
Yeah, discard. And I have 8 cards left in deck, and my board is Tamatoa and Cogsworth. I can't hardcast the whole new world because then I don't have enough. I think I still needed to play Dime, so I don't have enough ink. But what I could have done is play Dime, sing Whole New World with the Cogsworth, and then I'm guaranteed to see all the cards in my deck as soon as I see one cost item, because then it draws me the last one. I don't have to, like, the draw is not mandatory. Yeah. And I think I played 1 Mickey that game, if I remembered correctly, so there would have been at least 3 items left, and then if I play all of those and then quest Dime, I would have gone to 24 instead of 20. So I wish I would have needed that extra lore, and it would have been on stream. That would have been.
I was just about to say, if you were on stream,
yeah,
then that's worth doing. But like you say, if you've just had 3 long games, and you said you almost went to time, so I'm sure you were happy to just be like, it was just relief that, okay, I do win this.
Yeah, I was pretty sure, but what if in the end I played 2 or 3 Mickeys that game, and they all hit my 1 cost items, and then I lose? Yeah,
so it wasn't worth it unless you were on stream.
Yeah, so that I was super happy with that win, and now I was 1 win away from my qualification, and my pairing showed up on my phone before anyone else's pairing.
Okay.
So that was weird to me. I sat down. I want to go sit down after a restroom break, and there's already 2 players sitting at the table that's showing on my phone. So it was the wrong pairing, and I refresh. It shows me the correct pairing. But on the wrong pairing, I would have been lower seed, and then I see the correct pairing, and I was higher seed than than my opponent. So I sit down, and when we start playing, I realize, because we talk about it, I realize, oh, I'm actually higher seed. I was so relieved. I was against red purple, and it's, while I think I'm more likely to steal a game on the draw than they are to steal a game on the draw. I'm much better on the play, of course.
Yeah.
So that it was some cool games. In the end, on the play we really had great hands that were very, very difficult to beat for the other player. In my game 1, I did the Quill turn 5 Tamatoa, and then I actually almost ran out of cards because they kept clearing, even if I got some lore and I have a lot of ink. I almost ran out of cards, but then I play a Gaston. It actually gets me 3 cards that don't have any card draw or value really attached to them. So then I was like, oh, I'm actually bricking. But then I draw the second Gaston, and then the second Gaston finds me some more card draw. And if all I needed was stuff to do, and I win the game.
Yeah.
So they provided me stuff to do, and I won that. And then the other games, they weren't super interesting. I think we just had like almost exactly what you wanted on the play. And I actually had pretty good hand on the draw, but couldn't quite keep up with them. So everyone won the game on the play, so I won 2-1. And then I was over the moon about qualifying. Of course, I still want the Mickey, but
Of course.
my final matchup was against Sapphire Steel. They were playing Bell, Ariel, and Hard-Headed Beast. I was playing none of them. They were higher seed. So I was very, very unfavored. Probably the matchup is so much dependent on play or draw. Probably if I go first, I'm still favored, even if I have the worst list for the mirror.
Yeah.
And
so would you say for that reason you don't think it's worth teching for the mirror because you really do think it's that play draw dependent?
Yeah, so there's not a lot. I don't think there's a lot of value in teching for the mirror. And I think the first thing you do is max out on Tama Towers and play a few Let It Goes. And then only if you're expecting a lot, maybe you can tech for it. But I would only really include more Bells, Ariels if I also think for the rest of the matchup spread they're good. I wouldn't go out of my way to build my deck for the mirror.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, game 1, they just do ramp, Cogsworth stuff where I don't have a chance. And then I actually lose my game on the play, which was surprising, but I go past turn 2, they go Smee. I go Mickey, they go Quill. And I go Cogsworth, they go Cogsworth. So now they have the Quill on the board and the Smee. I have Mickey and Cogsworth.
Yeah.
So a lot of my on the play advantage is already gone. But generally, the on the play advantage is so good. I'd still be fine. But then my hand was 3 Whole New World, which meant that I didn't have any other option than to sing Whole New World myself.
Yeah.
While they are the ones that actually have more ink than me. So then they start winning the race. In the end, I play a Tamatoa on a board where I already have stuff. Mm-hmm. I need to quest with everything to even threaten the race, but that enabled them to I think take out the Cogsworth and then sing grab your sword plus Zeus in all the same turn to take out my entire board plus my Tamatoa. And then I actually draw another Tamatoa and it sticks. And if I have Dime, I win. But I only have just enough items to go to 19.
Mm-hmm.
And then my final item draws me Hiram Flavasham. I play Flavasham and I flip up the items. At this point, it would need to draw me 2 items out of 2 cards. So that's not very likely anyways. But the 2 cards that Flavasham drew were the 2 dimes that I would have had. If I would have had them at the start of the turn, I actually win that game. But to be fair, even if I win that game, I was super unlikely to win the series. And even without the Mickey, I was just very, very happy with how everything went.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you say, that was your main target going in. And yeah, no, I really appreciate that really thorough breakdown. It's super fascinating to me. Like anyone that's just looking to improve their knowledge base of the game and just learn things from experienced players. And I'm sure there's a lot of people watching that feel the same way, especially people that are going to Toronto. And this is this weird event where we get a 1-day meta, basically. Yeah. Which it must be super frustrating to prepare for anyone that is going. But you're not going to Toronto as far as I know, unless you're about to tell me. You're not. Okay.
So I'm on vacation. I would have gone actually. I'm going to Seattle.
Okay. Yeah.
Try to qualify to NA.
Is Brendan in Toronto playing or casting? I don't know if it's even been revealed, but
yeah, I don't.
Who knows?
I know that Kawa is playing Toronto as well.
Kawa's playing Toronto. Okay, cool.
Yeah, and then he's also contemplating Seattle. But I actually think Toronto. I like these 1-day metas because it's easy. I think for someone.
I think it's interesting for viewers. I would just be frustrated preparing for it.
Even as a competitor, I think if you are confident in your tournament preparation skills and your deck building skills, I think you can gain a bigger edge in a 1-day format than
for sure.
At the end of a set that's already been played out for.
It will reward those that put the most into it.
Yeah, but okay, no, I don't think any set has ever been sold.
Sold, yeah. Quote unquote. quote unquote, as far as we feel we've solved it, which is never completely, absolutely. But yeah, in that vein, I don't know if you've given little to any thought about it since you're not playing it. Perhaps you've discussed it with Kawa. Maybe that's a reason that you might have thought about it. But yeah, I mean, obviously, there's only so much detail you can go into. So, like, an overall sense of how, specifically Blue Steel, how you think it would perform for Toronto. And if you were going to go, what is a deck that you would lean towards? Would you lean towards this Blue Steel or towards one of the other decks that you've sort of championed throughout the last couple of sets?
Yeah, so I've done a few coachings helping people prepare.
Right.
But usually they already knew what deck they wanted to play and I just helped them build it. So I haven't really entirely thought through what would be the optimal bring. Now with Emerald Steel gone, I guess the question is how many of the players that don't play Emerald Steel would even change their deck, or do they just ride it out for the last event? And the ones that were on Emerald Steel previously, where do they really go? I think Ember Steel still has a lot of momentum in this set, but also going into the next set. And just based on theory, the Saphire decks lose one of their good matchups, and something like Red Purple, but also Emerald Amber lose their worst matchup. So they actually get significantly better.
Yeah.
I think Red Purple is a respectable deck again without Bucky, and I actually think Emerald Amber would probably be a very, very good bring, because while people know it exists, it's still played little enough where people don't really know how to play against it.
Yeah,
and at the same
absolutely.
time, power level wise, it is at now that Bucky's gone. I think before that it was actually not up to par, but I think now it's at least just as good. But if you were to really prepare, I think you would have to also make a new spreadsheet on the estimated matchups and everything, because now that Bucky's gone, I think aggro lost one of the worst, or like was losing to Bucky. Maybe there's a little bit more aggro. Maybe there's a little bit more Emerald Amber. Maybe there's a bit more Red Purple, but there was already a lot. Maybe the people because there's definitely a dedicated player base that likes to play Mufasa, but didn't want to play Mufasa because the Bucky matchup was quite bad.
Yeah.
Maybe Mufasa is like also slightly more popular. So if you take all of that into account, you could like work out what's a great bring again. I think personally, I would probably try Emerald Amber for that event. I think it's also pretty fun deck to play.
Yeah, I know that sounds fun, and I also think Emerald Amethyst is another deck that a lot of people really like. What do you think the odds of that coming out again for this one-day meta?
I think it's all right. I think Artabax didn't mind the Bucky matchup that much, but I think it was pretty bad. So I think it does also get quite a bit better.
A factor.
Sapphire Steel is another matchup where the deck can struggle a little bit, but other than that, deck's pretty good against Red Purple, good against Red Blue, good against some random decks that do random things because it's quite consistent. So I think Green Purple's also decent, or how you call it, EA tempo.
Just win the game.
Yeah.
I'm super excited. Like, again, for a one-day meta, like to see what. I think if you're watching the stream, you should have good choices for like lots of different matchups that we haven't been able to see the last format. Like you say, Amber Emerald, the Under the Sea deck. I think that could be super interesting. EA Tempo coming back. Do you think many Emerald Steel decks just switch to a variant that is similar to its set 3 form with like Merfolks and Prince John and things like that?
I'm not sure. I think that deck's probably still alright, but it's also whether that deck is actually still alright would require quite a bit of testing, and I don't think many people are going to put in that time. So I think people would still be largely put off by that idea.
Mm-hmm. So if you are going to Toronto, pretty open meta, really, and just have fun with a one-day meta where there's probably going to be a lot of variation in what we normally see. That's been the bulk of our interview, which has been, again, super fascinating to talk about, like, the extension of the set 4 meta, essentially, for the sake of Toronto, for anyone that's going. And again, I think even people that aren't going will just be fascinated with what you have to say. And like, some of these things may end up being relevant in set 5. We don't know how much is going to change. I dare say some things are going to change, and I would like to spend like maybe just 5 minutes. No need to go into too much detail, but anything in set 5 that you are excited for. But I said to Moyen before we started the stream, maybe let's talk about unless you disagree that Daisy is going to be impactful, then that's something we could explore if you feel differently. But if you are just firmly in the same camp as everyone else of like, yeah, it's especially early, it's going to be really good, then maybe we avoid that one. So like, thumbs up or thumbs down for Daisy?
So I guess Daisy good, but I actually think I don't think the hyper aggro deck, I think it will still be bad.
I think it's going to get pushed out, personally.
Yeah. But I think the reason for that is that Amber Steel will just really punish that deck.
Yes.
But Amber Steel will also probably just play Daisy itself, and then it can both punish aggro decks, but also be very aggressive against Sapphire decks. So I think Amber Steel will be an absolute force to be reckoned with. And I guess this is probably not what you want to hear, but I don't think it's really for the reasons that few people would expect. I'm not even sure Naveen and Pete will see that much play.
I'm 50-50 on Pete, and Naveen, I'm not sure. Like, I did look at an aggro version of Steel Song, because I'm preparing a video of like 10 day 1 deck lists. So I'm looking at different people's versions, and I've seen a couple that are that aggro Steel Song with Daisy and with Piglets, and then Naveen is just another like quick Zeus or whatever. I don't know. I'm not sold on Naveen. Or I was never completely sold on Naveen. I'm sold on Daisy for the first few weeks, and then I do think she's going to be pushed out as well. But is there anything that you are excited for? And again, this is all speculation. I'm sure you've had a lot of time to play test.
Yeah, I personally love both Chicha and the Sheriff of Nottingham. I think just going Chicha into Quill when Chicha goes unanswered, which if Ember Steel might have some things to say about that, but if it doesn't get answered quickly, just draws your card each turn. So each turn you like ink 2, draw 1 with Chicha Quill. I think that's extremely powerful. And then in my playtesting, I've had some turn 4 Nottinghams for like 4 ink, and a few turns later, sometimes you played very, very cheap. I think the Sapphire item builds with the Queen, I think they get better next set, potentially. I think this set, they were like close to being good enough, maybe not quite. I know it won the recent Bologna event. I still think it wasn't quite there. It was like extremely close, but I think it only gets better from here. So it does take a little bit of time to set up. So maybe in the early days, early weeks, it will be a little bit difficult to get off when the meta is still quite aggressive. But I think maybe it also necessitates the meta staying that little bit aggressive and proactive, because as soon as you don't pressure early, what if I go Chicha, Quill into like Sisu Medusa stuff, and then or Queen, set up my Queen, play a few items, have these super cheap Sheriff of Nottinghams. So if you don't pressure them, both Ruby Sapphire and Sapphire Steel will definitely have lines where if they don't get pressured, they run away with the game, I think. So maybe in deck building you can't build your deck that greedily, because you get like there's some pressure just from aggressive decks, and in the gameplay itself you really need to be careful to not provide them time, or at least remove the Chicha. But yeah, Chicha, Quill, Sheriffs, that had me really, really excited.
That's awesome. I'm super excited to see what you brew for next set. What is your next event that you're planning on going to?
Birmingham.
You are going to Birmingham. Good.
Birmingham, Seattle, Euros. That's the next 3, I think.
Which is we can now talk about as in Disneyland Paris. Are you excited for that? Was that
very much so. And also, I'm not sure we'll be allowed to, but the date for NA championships is in January, so technically you could play both. So I would love to qualify for the other one as well, if we're allowed to play both.
Following Din's footsteps and see if you can
Yeah.
play both. I actually don't know. I've not heard anything about whether or not that is okay or not. I'm sure that'll come out
I don't
soon.
think there's an official statement about it yet. I just hope it's possible.
Well, one person's qualified, so I think like if more people do it like yourself, then there's every reason to kind of like expect an answer to that at some point. But
Yeah.
I wish you the best of luck with it. Just to round us off. Two things. First of all, we like a bit of Disney. If you know me, you know I like a bit of a Disney fandom conversation. Obviously, we talked about Donald Duck earlier, who I'm going to assume is your favourite character. Do you have a favourite film, and do you have a favourite song from Disney?
No.
No,
probably
just not at all.
I actually watched the Great Mouse Detective. It's
Yes!
the most recent one I watched.
Yes, and you didn't like it.
Was okay.
You know what? I'll take that. That's a win as far as I'm concerned. Moyen, it's been a pleasure to have you. Please, for anyone watching that was not familiar with your Podcana, where can they find you?
So the podcast Podcana you can find on all platforms, and me, I haven't been streaming recently, but you can find. I basically post a lot of my thoughts and almost all of my deck lists on Twitter, which is Moyen_HS.
And both of those will be linked down below. Moyen, it's been great to have you. I look forward to seeing you in Birmingham and seeing what you're playing, and hopefully, well, I'll look forward to seeing in Euros, and good luck with that.
Thank you for having me.
And there we have it. Again, a really long video, but I enjoyed that conversation with Moyen so much. I got a lot out of it, and I hope my audience was able to get a lot out of it as well. A really nice guy, really talented player, and yeah, some really fascinating insights. But yeah, we're going to leave it there. Do please hit the like button. The algorithm is still not pushing my videos as much as it normally would because of the amount of breaks I've had recently. I'm trying to be consistent now, though. But yeah, if you did enjoy this content, do please hit the like button. It helps ever so much. But that's it from me for now. Thank you so much for watching. If you're brand new to the channel, please subscribe for all things Lorcana. Hit that like button to show your support, and we'll see you soon.